Hi, it's great to get together again. Had a ball the last time through Creative Force, and this time we're going to do it all over again from a different angle, in fact from many angles simultaneously. This particular video is called, in fact the project itself is called Quantum Guitar. I chose to use that particular term because of so many factors involved in this that it's really impossible to see this either as a micro subject or a macrocosmic subject. There are forms that we'll be dealing with in this that are in unison with the volumes of Creative Force, which we're dealing with parental forms. This time we're going to be dealing with parental transformations, multiple substitutions, linear motion, spatial fingerings, automatic destinations, quite a number of things that are going to come about simultaneously. The choice of doing things with regards to intellectual retainment, which I refer to as step time, compared to what I at times choose to portray from the emotions and from the heart and soul melodically, which I refer to as real time. There are so many things in quantum guitar to consider that it's impossible to even scratch the surface, and maybe that's what I find most of all interesting in sharing this with all of you. The idea of incorporating into this on your part, in behalf of the opportunities themselves, to begin to consider your opportunity and your responsibility and your accuracy with regards to the advantage of performing in the midst of other individuals as the audience, as well as those who are working with you and that are interacting with you. That's what this is all about, this particular series of works. And once again, to remind you, it's referred to as quantum guitar. Before we go any further, there are so many people involved in this, and I would like to bring to your attention that there are going to be some live performances, filming that will be available to you at certain points in this project. These particular performances took place in New York City in November in 1995 at a place called the Knitting Factory. There it was a performance with a quartet that I've had on the road for approximately 6 or 7 months now. On piano is James Riddle, on bass is Steve Beskrone, and on drums is Scott Robinson. There are so many things to bring to your attention that I think that makes it super important to bring the most valuable of them all to your attention, and that's tuning your guitar in unison with mine so that we can be compatible and in balance as much as possible. So I'll give you a tone on the A, and I'll play that as an open A, so giving you a chance to tune to that first. Welcome, and let's get started. Before we get involved with transformations of these parental forms that were discussed sometime back, in fact in 1993 on Creative Force, those two videos were dealing with the parental forms themselves and all of the substitutions that emerge from these amazing magical forms on the guitar. The only two that are based upon multiplication as opposed to the piano's usage of addition. In this particular case, there were two of them, one being the augmented and the other being the diminished. The difference between then and now is going to be the addition of a pedal tone, giving these four-dimensional proportions, as opposed to the three-dimensional that were prevailing in the last two works. In this case, it has four names. This is an E diminished, as so. It's a B flat diminished, as so. It's a D flat diminished as such. And it's a G diminished appropriately. So here we have four names vertically. Now horizontally the same thing occurs once again. Here we have four names horizontally. E diminished, G diminished, B flat diminished, and D flat diminished. The difference between then and now is going to be the addition of a pedal tone beneath it. So now we have this. E diminished over A. G diminished over A. B flat diminished over A. D flat diminished over A. Likewise, with those of you who are familiar with the last works on REH, we were talking about the four dominant seventh chords that came from the diminished chord itself as a parental form. In this particular case, these now become polychords automatically. So that prior to now, we were referring to the E diminished with lowering one tone, the root, to E flat, transform it into an E flat seventh. This time it's over A. Back to the parental form, the diminished. And we'll now take the B flat of that diminished chord, the second name of it, and lower the B flat to an A. It's an A seventh over A. Back to the parent. We'll now lower the D flat to C. It's now a C seventh over A. Back to the parental form again. G diminished. G to G flat. G flat seventh over A. So too, all of these forms collectively conceal a secret of the guitar, which is primarily based upon vertical distributions and horizontal distributions. I've shared with you primarily, to begin with, the vertical formations. Horizontally, they all apply likewise, just the way the parent did with automatic fingerings, the same all the time. The only difference now, we're talking about four different subjects. In the case of the E flat diminished, coming from the E, rather from the E diminished, going to an E flat seventh, it looked like this. Now if you move that a minor third horizontally up the fingerboard, which is the diminished interval, it will be here. Now you have a G to a G flat. These transformations are coming only from the fourth string. Since there are 4, 3, 2, and 1 being used, the fourth, the third, the second, and the first, the organization of string groups applies to this particular demonstration. We're taking the fourth string and lowering the fourth to E flat. Once again, the second inversion, the G on the fourth string to G flat, the third inversion, the B flat on the fourth string to A, and the fourth inversion, the D flat on the fourth string to C, C seventh. So now we have this to consider. E flat seventh over A, horizontal. G flat seventh over A. B flat seventh, or rather A seventh over A. And finally C seventh over A. That's only one of the four formations that structure the fingering of the guitar's automatic proportions. The other three look like this. A seventh over A, C seventh over A, E flat seventh over A, and G flat seventh over A. And those proportions are being formulated from the third string's points of reference. Therefore A, C, E flat, and G flat. The third arrangement is on the second string. This time it's C, which again, as a reminder of the past videos called Creative Force, let me bring your attention to that particular grouping came from this parental form. C sharp to C became C seventh, and the C sharp just happened to be on the second string. So now we're going to take that and horizontally distribute it as such. C seventh over A, E flat seventh over A, G flat seventh over A, and A seventh over A. That's the third of the four groups. The fourth, in the first position, looks like this. Now we're going from the first string, G to G flat, makes it G flat seventh over A. First string B flat to A. The next one is D flat to C, seventh over A. And finally, we have E to E flat. So now we have four more of these, and what we now have is this. The difference between then and now was the use of substitutions were primarily being based upon a three-dimensional concern. In other words, if I were to improvise substitutionally against an A seventh in this particular position, as I discussed before, I use personally through my own choice, I enjoy using a minor seventh, a perfect fifth higher, from the root being the name of the key center of the chord. So this being an A seventh, my personal choice is an E minor seventh. If in that same position my choice had been a G flat seventh coming from the parent form to a G flat seventh here, G diminished to G flat seventh. In that position, that area in a two-dimensional formation would be like this. So on and so forth. The nature of these forms that I have brought to your attention some time ago had a great deal to do with my substitutions in a three-dimensional context. In other words, when I say three-dimension, I'm thinking of one key center. In the case of the diminished chord being lowered from the third string in this particular position, from the B flat to an A, as so. Under this, my substitution for this at that particular point in time had a great deal to do with the perfect fifth higher to the key of E, which I've discussed in depth some time back, appearing as such in this particular position. So you can see that all of that is here. In the sense of how this is going to portray itself with regards to substitutions horizontally, as I've said a moment back, this form shall move in minor thirds as so. So too shall these forms as linear proportion look like this. What this brought to my attention was a solution to a perceptual problem with regards to defining one parental form against the other. What did they have to do with each other? In this particular case, the diminished chord was the primary form that caused all of these horizontal and vertical forms for me personally in the idiom that I was functioning in. So here we had this, this, and this. But none of these things contained for me at that particular point the augmented form, which was based upon pure majors and pure minors. And that, of course, also totally automatic in major thirds as opposed to minor thirds. This is what resulted separate from the analysis. In the case of an A seventh, as I brought to your attention, my initial concern was E minor seventh. In doing it as so, this had nothing to do with an A7 sharp 5. It had nothing to do with an A7 flat 5. And the solution of this came about as such. The second inversion of A7th from the diminished chord here is the first on a 4-3-2-1 group. The second is here. This is where the solution can be found. In doing so, I have an A7th here. I can also see this as a polychord known as A major over G. When I raise the fifth, known as an A7 sharp 5, it's also viewable as an A augmented over G. Because of this, when I see this in the light of multiple substitutions, I now have this to think of. It initially came from the diminished chord with the B flat to A 7th. By raising the fifth, A7 sharp 5. It sounded good to me in those years prior to having the ability to analyze this, to just play melodies against such changes as this that made a lot of sense to me in terms of personal fulfillment. And along that time, along those forms, I came to enjoy this particular substitution for that chord. A7 sharp 5, B flat minor 7th. But I didn't quite know what that had to do with the augmented form as a parental structure. There is the B flat minor. We have here an A augmented, an F augmented, a C sharp augmented over G. If I take the A augmented and raise the root 1/2 step higher, I now have B flat minor over G. B flat minor over G gives me the proportions of an E flat 9 without the root. Since I initially learned in the blues idiom with players such as Willis Jackson, Gene Ammons, Sonny Stitt in the earlier days, these particular forms fit the blues. When this enters into it, the same thing takes place. The only difference now is the resolution of the final note. So that if I were to play a B flat minor 7th chord as such, and play this line for you, you'll hear it as so. The only difference in this change coming up is the last note. So now I have a B flat minor 7th against A, 7th sharp 5. That also should be seen as coming not only from the E flat 7th, which is the B flat minor, a perfect 5th higher, as opposed to a B flat minor as the augmented transformation of one note, one step higher, a minor 2nd higher, as opposed to a perfect 5th. So in one I had B flat minor for E flat 7th, in the other I have B flat minor for A 7th. This comes about as so. If I take the E flat 7th, or the E flat 9, and lower the 5th, the sharp 5, to a perfect 5th, I now have this, which is the diminished chord, which initially came from the augmented form as well. So now there is a marriage between the two parental forms, and there is a balance, a natural balance between this form of perception in controlling these forms. So now I can think of this with regards to the pedal tone being A. Now I can think of G to G flat over A, C sharp to C over A, E to E flat over A, B flat to A over A. Now it's in 4 dimensions as opposed to 3 dimensions mentioned earlier. With regards to the dominant 7ths themselves, we have 4 of them in each diminished chord over the pedal tone. So the E flat 7th is going to be, or rather the G flat 7th will be here. And like before, I had G flat 7th giving me the perfect 5th higher, D flat minor 7th would be the substitution. If I then coordinate B flat minor 7th with the next multiple substitution, it will add this to the family. The next would be D flat to C over A, would give me G minor 7th. D flat 7th came from the G flat. So D flat minor 7th here over A. The chord that now shall be played is an A7 sharp 5, and the substitution that I'm going to demonstrate here is in one position as an E minor 7th. One more time. Again, A7 sharp 5, but now the substitution shall be B flat minor 7th. Now again an A7 sharp 5, the substitution shall be G minor 7th. Now the A7 sharp 5 shall be played again, and this time the substitution will be from the D flat minor 7th. Now let's see how we can, through motion of these forms, one flowing into another, multiple substitutions emerge on the same voicing, an A7 sharp 5. Here I'm going to use 2 at a time to give you a demonstration to hear the harmonies and the melodies in these substitutions. A7 sharp 5. I now will play E minor 7th into G minor 7th. How about G minor 7th into E minor 7th? The next shall be D flat minor 7th, also with a B flat minor 7th against A 7th sharp 5. One more time. Two different forms in the light of that. Now let's take another possibility, which could also be a B flat minor 7th into a G minor 7th. One more time. Before moving on to further extensions, including linear expressions and motion on the guitar as a matrix, I'd like to add to what we've been talking about so far a situation that occurs time and time again between musicians. There are two different opinions for what polychords may be called, and in many cases, with regards to a chord such as A 7th sharp 5 being seen as A augmented over G in this particular string group, that for some musicians, especially in the case of pianists, these particular opinions consider it in this context that this is a triad, but the pedal tone is not a complete key center with root, third, and fifth in it. So that a polychord in those cases are referred to as two different chordal keys. So when we are doing this, this is one way of looking at it, which is normally seen as with a slash. You'll see A augmented slash G. Or you might even see, in a case like a chord like this, a D minor 7th flat 5 can also be seen with a pedal tone as an E underneath, D minor 7th flat 5 slash E. Or it can also be seen without that pedal tone as F minor slash D. This is one way of seeing polychords referred to much along the lines idiomatically of hard bop. Now you can see how the A 7th sharp 5 has four multiple substitutions. In this particular case being B flat minor 7th, E minor 7th, G minor 7th, and D flat minor 7th. Now let me bring to your attention the use of this in a different kind of way. What I will do is play those same substitutions, and now let's take the clusters themselves. Instead of only the A7 sharp 5, let's try some different proportions. Let's try the A7 sharp 5 with these multiple substitutions, first and foremost over the polychord called E flat 7th sharp 5. And in this particular case, the E flat 7 sharp 5 is like this over the A. One more time. One more time. One more time. One more time. In this particular case, what I've just played was the B flat minor 7th against it, a G minor 7th against it, a D flat minor 7th against it, and an E minor 7th against it. And now that's against the E flat 7th sharp 5 over A. Likewise, moving in a minor third, the same thing will occur again over a C 7th sharp 5 over A. And again over an A 7th sharp 5 as it initially did to begin with. And the final addition would be the G flat 7 sharp 5 over A. With the same substitutions multiplied against these multiplications of the structure itself as an architectural structure. So now let's take it from the bottom, from the G flat 7 sharp 5, and move these in minor thirds as so. case of the line forms that I am improvising through, I'm taking the substitution as a minor seventh, starting with a B flat minor seventh here, D flat minor seventh here, E minor seventh here, and G minor seventh here. That would be the horizontal display of this particular form of motion. And then we have the vertical tangents being in the same way, the B flat minor seventh here, the D flat minor seventh here, the E minor seventh here, and the G minor seventh here. So you see we have a vertical structure of all of these minor sevenths as multiple substitutions, as well as horizontal for any single type of those substitutions, and we'll get to that in a little while. The chord that shall be played against this time through shall be in this order: G flat 7 sharp 5 over A7 sharp 5 over A, C7 sharp 5 over A, and E flat 7 sharp 5 over A. And each time what I shall do is improvise over the substitutions, multiply. Therefore you'll hear B flat minor 7th over G flat 7 sharp 5, D flat minor 7th, E minor 7th, and G minor 7th over the same chord. Then you'll hear the same multiples over A7 sharp 5, and so on and so on. And what I'll do is I'll call the name of the substitution that I'm using so that you can get an idea of the compatibility between the two. First, the chord is G flat 7 sharp 5 over A. I'll be playing in B flat minor. Now I'll play in D flat minor. Now I'll play in E minor. Now I'll play in G minor. A7 sharp 5 over A, B flat minor. D flat minor 7th. E minor 7th. G minor seventh. The next chord, C7 sharp 5 over A, B flat minor. D flat minor. E minor. G minor. The next chord is E flat 7 sharp 5 over A, B flat minor. D flat minor. E minor. G minor. There are the four total forms, the 7 sharp 5, dominant 7 sharp 5, and the way they are being used is as polychords over the A as substitutions for each other, and also substitutions as the households of each of the substitutions that are being used as minor sevenths. Therefore, there is the house of G flat as a key center for the structural, the architecture of improvisation is going to take place within that topic. So what I'm referring to as a house is a topic. In the case of the G flat 7 sharp 5, it looks like this is the house. The topic as a polychord is A. And the chord that is being taken from it, likewise, as I've described earlier, in coordination with two volumes on the same phenomenon known as creative force, we're dealing with these phenomena as well over A. And what you're hearing is 4 named topics containing 4 named substitutions in multiple action, both vertically and horizontally.